Ladies and gentlemen, ladies.
And
Mostly
many of the ladies, we don't really care about the gentlemen.
Right.
We're both married. But
Yes.
anyway, this is, of course, the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. And I am, of course, Jason. And this is, of course...
Of course, the horse that named Craig.
Yes, Wilbur. Anyway, this is, of course, the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. What we do here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole is we take a central theme each and every week. We talk about that theme, and until something inspires us, an opinion inspires us, a story inspires us, we take off on another tangent. We take that tangent until its end or until Craig gets tired of listening to me rant. We come right back here because he doesn't censor himself. He only censors me, and that's oppression, and we need to talk about that after the show. But anyway, when we come back to that theme, we start talking about it again and we get back on topic. And this week's topic is, of course, after our disclaimer, Craig will tell us what our topic is.
All right. Our disclaimer is every week we pick a topic. We do research on the topic. We research both sides of it. Also add our opinions. Let's be real, mostly our opinions, but we still, take in the facts and we try to go both sides. But again, this is entertainment. If you're easily offended, now's the time to fuck off because you don't want to watch the rest of it because we're probably going to piss you off. My goal is to piss the world off one person at a time. So, all right. And today's topic is SkinWalker Ranch.
Ooh, this is a good one. This is a good one. All right. So, this is our first foray into aliens and the conspiracy of aliens, but this is more than just a conspiracy about aliens. This is big. SkinWalker is one of those topics that there's thousands of rabbit holes in and amongst its own story.
Right. Well, and it's not just, SkinWalker Ranch has been documented since the 90s, but that entire area has been a hotbed for basically centuries. There's the Ute tribe talked about it, back, in the 1800s of visitors.
Yes. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the area first.
Okay. Well, the area is in northeast corner of Utah, just southeast of the town Ballard, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I've heard different things, but it's like 500 acres of land.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, I think there's mountains there. I can't remember.
Yeah, it's kind of in a valley.
Yeah, and it borders on the Ute Indian Reservation.
Yes, and it's to give you a geographical area. It's about 150 miles from Salt Lake City. So, and it's a reservoir of about 500 acres. Some call it the area Bottle Hollow. It's the Bottle Hollow is a premier resort that's built in the area, so that's kind of where Bigelow came into this whole thing. But Indian reservation. That's what I'm trying to fucking say. I can't fucking talk today this morning. All right, so it is an Indian reservation, and SkinWalker is one of those cryptids that we probably will have to cover eventually. So, SkinWalker, it's a Native American legend of shapeshifters that are fucking evil, and they take you over. But because of the legend of the SkinWalker that was in this area, that's why most of the Native Americans stayed away.
Right. Well, and I heard some stories that the Ute Indian Tribal Council have said that, that area where SkinWalker Ranch is off limits and no Ute is allowed to step foot on the property. But then I've also heard, and then another thing said that they just discouraged them. They didn't forbid them from it.
Yeah. There's Zach and the boys from Ghost Hunters or whatever the hell that show is.
Yeah.
The dude from Vegas, they go around, they do the little paranormal investigations. But
Ghost Adventure.
yeah, they did. There's a great episode of them in the valley around the SkinWalker Ranch, and it's hilarious because they sit down there and there's a shaman that goes through all this ritual and makes them drink out of this bowl, and then I'm going to paraphrase, but I'm going to try to quote what he said. He goes, and unbeknownst to us, there was a powerful hallucinogen in that potion. so, so they're out there in this valley around a bonfire tripping balls, and they didn't realize that they were going to be hallucinating.
Peyote.
Yeah.
All right. So, I guess the best way to start this is back in 1994, there was a family. You can look it up. I don't know their true identity. I didn't bother to look that part up because, they want to stay somewhat under the radar and private. They value their privacy. So I'm going to respect that, and I'll call them the Gormans because that's what George Knapp called them. They're also called the Shermans by other people.
I saw Terry and Gwen Sherman is. Yeah.
But I also don't believe that's their real name. And kudos for them. I don't think their real name should be let out because they don't need shit. They've dealt with enough. So in 1994, they bought this ranch. It was their dream home. They got this 500 acres. There's 3 homesteads on it. There's like, one up close, one in the middle, one in the back. And so they're just super excited. They got this. And they weren't there a week and all hell broke loose.
It kind of like the Lutz family from
Amityville.
Kind of the same thing, because they were the Lutz family was only in that home for 30 days.
Yeah. So the story that I want to talk about first, because this one I found just incredible, is so I think it's one of their first days there. They got all their cattle and they put them inside their fenced-in area, and they see this wolf out in the distance. And, the wolf just kind of walks up to them, and when it gets closer, this wolf is fucking huge.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe you guys watch Game of Thrones and seen the dire wolves in there. That's like the size of this wolf. And the dire wolves have been big for centuries.
Yeah, and I've actually, the story you're saying, I've actually heard it referred to as a dire wolf.
Yeah.
Is the wolf that they've seen. So
this wolf comes up to them. It's friendly. They pet the wolf, and they think, oh, it must be somebody's pet. Well, then a calf comes up and sticks its head outside, just its muzzle outside the fence, and this wolf launches on it and just latches onto it and shaking it, doing what animals do, predators do. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Sherman has his son go and get his gun. So he comes back. He's got this .357 Magnum. He shoots the wolf. Nothing.
Point blank.
Yeah.
Point blank, he shoots the wolf.
Right. Nothing. He shoots this wolf 4 times. I'm sorry. I screwed up. Before he shoots the wolf, they grab these huge sticks and they're beating the wolf, trying to get the wolf to let go.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. So then he shoots the wolf 4 times. It's the 4th time he shoots him. The wolf finally lets go and kind of looks at him. And he has his son run in and get his hunting rifle, which is a 30-06. Mm. He shoots the wolf with a 30-06. And the wolf just kind of shrugs it off. Then he shoots it again. It tears out this hunk of flesh, and the wolf finally takes off. So he shoots this wolf with a .357 Magnum 4 times, with a 30-06 twice. And, yeah, it took out a chunk of flesh, but the wolf seemed unfazed by all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and beating it with sticks.
Right.
I don't know about you, but right then would be enough for me to go, beautiful place. Too bad we can't stay.
Right. So after that is the part that I really like. After that, they contact the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and 2 BIA officials come and investigate. And when they're investigating, they see 2 humanoid figures standing in the distance.
Oh yeah.
And so when they're standing in the distance, they kind of go and investigate a little bit. But when they get closer, they see that they're dog-like, and they're standing upright, but they're dogs.
Yeah, smoking cigarettes,
staring back at them,
wearing trench coats.
Yeah, and then so they sat there and they stared out, and they said they both were about 200 pounds, which is huge for a dog anyway. We're not discounting the fact that they're standing up smoking, but they're about 200 pounds, staring back at him, and then they just kind of went, fuck off, and they left, and they disappeared into the daylight.
Yeah,
and they weren't seen again.
The cigarette butts were still on the ground though.
Yeah.
That was freaking. I love that too. I was like,
so that goes back to just the Skinwalker lore. That makes it. The Skinwalkers are really interesting cryptids in the whole scheme of things, because they shapeshift. They're highly intelligent. Now, they smoke. They got a problem. We're gonna try to get them on some Chantix along with Ray Liotta. Get them to stop doing that. But it's one of those things that it scares the hell out of Native Americans when you talk about a Skinwalker.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter which one. I mean, yeah, especially when you get to that region of the country. It scares the hell out of these people. I mean, so when you throw that on top of what we're about to talk about, it just makes this whole area even spookier, because I mean, we're only going to talk like about 2 hours today, but we're going to admit we're only going to just scratch the surface of what this whole
there's tons of information out there that if you want to know more, you can go and look it up. But I'm going to put this out there right now. Don't go to the fucking property. That's just stupid. I mean, for one, I believe now it's owned by a corporation, but I have a feeling that they have ties with the military.
They do. It's okay. I'll kind of walk this through. It's owned by a billionaire named Robert Bigelow.
He sold it.
He sold it to a company that sold it to a company that sold it to a company that's still owned by Bigelow Aerospace.
Oh, okay.
So he still officially or unofficially owns, Bigelow Aerospace still technically kind of owns the property, but it's been a shell corporation over a shell corporation over a shell corporation. So it's just, you can watch lots of YouTube videos of people that have gone out there to try to see the activity. There's a YouTube video with Joe Rogan that goes out there with a guy. There's YouTube videos of several other people that go out there. The most notable is Joe Rogan, /podcaster /MMA announcer out there trying to see activity, but just don't do it.
And there's actually really, I mean, they made a movie out of it in 2013, which I watched. Wasn't a bad movie. It wasn't like blockbuster, but it wasn't a bad movie. I thought they did a good job with it. But there's also a documentary by George Knapp and another guy, I can't remember his name off the bat, which is George Knapp is an award-winning journalist. Most people might know him from his show Coast to Coast. But he spent years researching SkinWalker Ranch, and he's got all these tapes and all this evidence that they finally released in the documentary after he got permission from Robert Bigelow.
Yeah. Okay, so in 2007, a secret unclassified government program called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program began investigating UFOs, and the program had a $22 million budget, and most of that money was received by Robert Bigelow. Bigelow Aerospace. So they still kind of own.
Right.
It's one of those things where you can people own shit, but it's through or tax loopholes and
Right.
so he's still. We're just gonna say he owns it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, going back to, the Shermans.
Yes.
So it was very strange to them because when they bought the property from the previous owners, in the selling contract and stuff, there was a section saying, don't dig on the property without contacting the previous owners first.
Okay. There's a lot of problems solved out there in the desert.
Yep. So I mean, that right there should have been a red flag,
Right. That yeah.
So they don't think anything of it. They buy it, and then like I said, almost instantly shit started happening. Like Mr. Sherman's out with a post hole digger. He's digging holes, shit, and it's lunchtime. He runs inside to get drink of water, quick lunch, and go pee. And comes back out. His post hole digger's gone. So he goes back and goes, all right, who the hell took my fucking post hole digger? And everybody's like, we don't know what you're talking about. And then fast forward like 3 or 4 days later, he finds his post hole digger. Mind you, this thing weighs 75 pounds. Or not 70. It was found 75 feet in the air in a tree, but it's heavy.
Yeah.
And there's no way anybody in his family could have put it up in a fucking tree 75 feet up.
If he didn't do it, his wife didn't do it, his 2 children definitely didn't do it.
Right. So, yeah. And then we go to Mrs. Sherman. She had her ritual when she took a shower. She would get her brush out, lay it out there, have her towel hanging on the door, and she would always lock the door when she took a shower. So she hops in the shower, does her business, gets out, brush, towel, gone. And, there's just, they would show up later. I mean, they would have things disappear and show up in weird spots all the time.
Let's go back to the lock thing real quick. And when they moved in, one of the things that they noticed when they moved in that there were deadbolts on not only the doors, but the windows too. And they were set to where the door could be locked to either keep people out of the home or keep people in the home.
Right.
They were set both ways. So they found that to be really strange. Plus, don't dig on the yard unless you get previous permission. But they also found a large chains outside that looked like they were for the purpose of restraining a heavy animal.
Right.
Now that's all they said about the chains. But when we talked about the wolf thing already, that there was huge. They were talking about how I talked about how the humanoid creatures that the Bureau of Indian Affairs had witnessed, and they were about 200 pounds. There were reports that these dire wolves were the size of small cars. So you have chains on the property that were there to restrain a heavy animal. So they were there to restrain these type of wolves that were running around the property.
Right. Yeah, that kind of makes weird up. Okay, I'm going to stray off a little bit here because yes, they saw lights in the sky, all this stuff, but there are a bunch of military posts in northern Utah.
Yes.
Air Force and a couple other branches. So I want to play devil's advocate and get the other side saying, some of this could just be military projects.
Right. There's Air Force base that's in that area that was part of the round trip from Area 51 to the Air Force base in Utah, and then they'd make these test flights, and then the next night they would fly it back. So a lot of when you talk about Area 51 or Groom Lake or Dreamland or whatever you want to call that little area of Nevada, a lot of the UFO stuff that's been cited around there can be written off as test airplanes, test aircraft from there. But the same could be held true in this area, that it could be the same experimental aircraft, because they're the flight patterns, they went from Wright-Patterson to Groom Lake to northern Utah, because let's face it, you get on that side of the Mississippi River, only 30% of our population lives on that side. If you don't believe me, just look at a light map at night of the United States. There's no light on that part of the country.
Wow. So, so now that we got that out of there,
yes,
I'm going to bring us back into some of the stuff that happened. So, there are just really strange occurrences, and the weirdest thing is they never did the same thing twice.
Mm.
So they had this cord of wood stacked up, and then they turn their backs to it. They're busy doing something else, and this is, like, mind you, like a 10-minute time frame. They turn around, the wood is gone, and it's been moved to the other side of the property, stacked back up. This is shit that they would deal with on a daily basis. And, there were stories of, them hearing footsteps and voices outside their house at night. And it was like they were being taunted by these voices. It was a language they could not understand, but they would see, like, these black figures walking outside, in the dark, and see them peering in the window with, like, no face. Just a head.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was strange shit going on all the time.
Man.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I really liked was they would look out into their field, and at night it would just light up like it's a football stadium. That's how they described it.
Oh, yeah.
A football stadium at night, but it's in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden their field is lit up. And sometimes they didn't know why. Other times, it was because the triangular black craft that they could see in the air. So, and like one of them, they saw there was a UFO that was larger than what they said. At the time, well, they used the American football field as a size unit of measurement. And if you don't understand how big, for those of us that don't watch American football or watch other sports, the American football field is essentially an acre between what's called the end zones. So it's about 42,000 square feet. So they were saying that there was an aircraft that was twice the size of an American football field hovering over their field, and then with apparent alien figures over 7 feet tall at the controls.
Yeah.
Watching them.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into the Bigfoot one we did previously too, because
there was a craft that came down, and there was Bigfoot at the controls. They could see through, like, the windows of the craft. So there was these crafts start showing up. So they have wolves, they got strange locks, things are disappearing, things are being moved. Now they have craft that are showing up.
And back to the Native American lore as well, there was a trickster element to everything it did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's trickster is very prominent in Native American cultures, and the Skinwalker is called a trickster as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that ties into that too. That's kind of it's fascinating but horrifying at the same time.
Right. It's like Loki.
Yeah.
How Loki can change his appearance to be, he can make you believe that he's somebody else. Like if you've seen the beginning of Ragnarok, where he had all Asgard making him believe that he was Odin.
Yeah.
And the Matt Damon cameo in that part. I'm a trickster.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was there. There's so many stories about what went on there. And the Sherman family only lived there for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the timeline goes, they bought the house in the place in 1994. They lived there for 2 years, but by the end of that 2 years, they're all sleeping in the same room with the lights on for safety.
Yeah.
Because there was they had a lot of poltergeist activity as well.
And they end up, well, we'll go into this selling, but one of the reasons that they wanted to buy the ranch was he wanted to be a cattle rancher.
Right.
And one of the things, the two most common things that you hear about aliens is anal probing and cattle mutilations.
Right.
And this is where you really start to hear a lot about. This is where most of the cattle mutilation stories began.
Right. What is their beef with cattle? Beef pun. But what the hell do cattle do to anybody?
Other than being tasty.
Right. But I mean, so these poor cattle are getting slaughtered left and right. And yeah, because I mean, they lost. I mean, back to what you're talking about. Mr. Sherman was an expert at insemination. He was very knowledgeable about it. He had a scientific approach to it. And he wanted basically to create this, basically, if you go back, it's like the ultimate race of cattle. But so, that was his goal, like you said, to be a cattle rancher, but they end up losing like close to like 2/3 of their cattle.
Yeah. And we're not talking like just, cattle dropping over dead. We're talking like one instance, everything from its shoulder up, except for the bones, was gone. It was completely dissected from the shoulder up. All the skin, the flesh, the brain, the eyeballs, everything was removed in such surgical precision that it was almost like the flesh was boiled off of this part, and it was the only thing left was the rest of the body, which was still warm to the touch, and then the head. And I mean, everything was just expert. Like, it was the bones were bleached, like they'd been out for years.
Right.
But it happened overnight.
And the story about how this happened is really fascinating, because they had just gone out, and this was just it was like a calf, and they had just tagged its ear, so it had this bright yellow plastic tag on its ear. And then they had their dog with them. Then they go off because they were tagging cattle. So this is a 45-minute period of time. They're out and going that, so they're way away from this cattle they just tagged. Then their dog, which dogs are the ultimate sensor for these things.
Yeah.
The dog, starts, freaking out, and then takes off towards where the calf was, and they never see this dog again.
Yeah.
And so they get back to where the cattle is, or the calf is, and they find it like that. And the tag that was just put on was cut. The whole ear was cut off. And this is when they had contacted NIDS, which is the National Institute of Discovery Science that Robert Bigelow had formed, that ran from the early 1990s to it shut down in 2004. I think that's when he created the aerospace ship.
Yeah.
But so they called them in, and they called them in before that, and they were actually on vacation at that time in Vegas, and they had to call them. They came back. So they did this autopsy, basically. They called it a necropsy or something like that. But the most fascinating part is you got the skin laid open. You see there's all the meat is gone. You see ribs, you see everything, and there's no blood on the ground anywhere.
Right.
So this calf was taken somewhere else, killed, and brought back.
Yeah.
They would also find other cattle dead that looked like that had no wounds on them at all, but looked like they had dropped from a large height.
They just open up the door, shove the calf out, shove
Yep.
the cow out.
And, a little bit more information on Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow was a real estate developer and was quite rich, but had a fascination for this stuff.
Yeah, he also owned Budget Suites.
Yes.
So that's where a lot of his money came from. But in 1996, the family sold the ranch. Now,
Right.
when they put it on the market, they didn't want. They felt bad because they got duped. They didn't want to dupe another family into this type of thing. So they ended up vacating the home in 1996.
Right. And this is when Bigelow bought the property and basically had a team of researchers there all the time. But the thing is these beings, whether they are ghosts, whether they're skinwalkers, whether they're aliens, these are sentient beings with a very high intelligence. So they knew you're watching them.
Yeah.
And, one of the other things that while the Shermans still lived there, they had a visitor one day who was out at the gates honking his horn. So Mr. Sherman comes down there and the guy's like, I don't know why, but I'm just drawn here. I need to come out here and meditate. And he's like, I got a calling to come here. So they take him out to the Middle Homestead, which is basically ground zero for everything that's going on. And they give him this chair, and the guy's sitting in a chair out in the middle of, the fields or whatever, out by the middle of the homestead, outside, meditating. And then they said this, like the movie Predator, where he's invisible, but you see the shimmering.
Right.
This 9-foot tall being comes out of the woods, and all they can see is a shimmering.
Mm-hmm.
And comes up to this guy and lets out this horrifying scream. And it's like they said they couldn't even describe the sound of it. It's something they had never heard before in their entire life. And so, they go out there, rush out there, try to help this guy, and the thing just disappears. And when they get out there, the guy is just shaken. He's terrified. He's crying. He latches on to Mr. Sherman and said, "This place is possessed by the devil. You have to get me out of here. Yep, get me out of here." So they take him back to his car. The guy tears off. He's cursing the place the entire time. But the guy kind of got what he asked for.
Right. So we talked about that Bigelow's firm is whatever. I mean, Bigelow Aerospace is basically we're just going to call it Bigelow Aerospace. They bought the ranch, and they did their own investigations on it, and they released information that says that the UFOs that had seen in the area were not consistent with current military aircraft. So, like we touched on earlier, that there is a lot of experimental aircraft that come through this area, with the Air Force bases being out there in the middle of nowhere, plus Area 51 being just a few hundred miles away. So that there's obviously experimental aircraft that have been through that area, but we can't touch on that doesn't explain the 9-foot tall Predator, doesn't explain the faceless ones, doesn't explain the 2 football field sized aircraft that was above their place. It doesn't talk about the triangular aircraft that they'd seen frequently. Now that one, their triangular aircraft have been seen pretty much all over the world.
Right.
So that one is probably the most consistent shape outside of the saucer shaped aircraft that was popularized in the 40s and 50s.
Right. I think before we get more into because I got some notes on that, but I would like to touch on some more of the stuff that happened before they sold the ranch.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So the farmer and his wife, and this is
Farmer and his wife, the farmer and his wife.
Yeah, they had these bulls. They had 4 bulls. These are like 2,000-pound bulls. They're huge, and they're like their pride. And they were out driving around their property, and they were talking, and they're like going, "Could you imagine if something happened to those bulls? We would just be done. We'd be bankrupt. We'd lose everything if we lost those bulls." So they get back to the property, and they look at the fenced-in area where the bulls are, and the bulls are nowhere to be seen. So they start freaking out, like, fuck, it's almost like somebody was eavesdropping on them. So they're freaking out, and so they're both off looking for, in different areas, looking for the bulls, seeing if they can find them. And on a hunch, the farmer walks up to this trailer, which is butted up to the corral where the bulls are, and he sees that the back of it is still locked. Because they kept it locked with a padlock and stuff like that. And that's the only way to get into that from the corral. And there was a side door that was open. And he goes and he peeks in, and the 4 bulls are inside this trailer. And this is a cramped area, which trying to get 4 bulls inside a cramped trailer is virtually impossible. But they're just standing in there like in a trance-like state. And he's like, holy shit. And then so he yells out to his wife that, hey, I found him. And when he yelled out, it snapped the bulls out of it, and they just started demolishing the trailer. I mean, this trailer is something that they'd use for tools and stuff like that. But they demolished the trailer. They kicked the back door open, and they got out. But I mean, it's like as soon as they heard him yell, it snapped them out of their trance, and they freaked out.
Right, but like a sleepwalker.
Yeah,
you don't wake a sleepwalker up because they don't know where they are. They freak out.
And the weirdest thing about this is the NIDS team show up, because I called the NIDS team. They show up, not long afterwards, but the fence around the corral, it's a metal fence, but it was magnetized. So they found, in after a period of time, that wore off and it was no longer magnetized. But it was just really strange that, it's like whatever it was kind of made the metal in the fence magnetic.
Right, which
created an electromagnetic field.
Yeah, which only happens through electricity. Right. And to magnetize a fence, I mean, you can create electromagnet by, wrapping a wire around a nail and attaching it to a battery. You can charge the polarity of a piece of steel.
Yeah.
But it goes away.
Yeah.
When the power source is gone, it's no longer a magnet.
Right.
But to make a fence into a magnet, that's power on a scale that
is unbeknownst to us.
Unheard of.
Right. So some other things that happen, and this one is really fucking weird. Another thing about that calf that we talked about, they found the femur of that calf 10 feet away from it, and it's like it was just ripped out and tossed there. But again, no blood where that calf was. So it's nighttime, and they hear this noise, and I think this is when everything lit up, like the football field thing again. And he's got 3 dogs, and they went through a lot of dogs, mind you. And so the 3 dogs take off to go after it, and the farmer doesn't go with them because he's a bit freaked out. And so he hears dogs running out there yapping, and he hears like this electrical like zzz noise, and then he hears the dogs yip, and then nothing, silence. And it's nighttime, a lot of weird shit going on outside. He's like, I'm not going out there tonight, check it. I'll check it in the morning. So in the morning he goes out, and mind you, this whole time, no sign of the dogs anywhere. So he goes out to the spot where all this was happening, where he had, and there was 3 greasy spots on the ground, like the dogs were just vaporized. Now, imagine that there are beings that have this sort of technology, and they're just fucking with us.
Right. Your dogs are noisy, so I mean, there are times when I would like to do that to my neighbors,
right?
Because of their dogs,
right?
Not to the dogs. I want to do it to the neighbors.
But it's one of the things that they talked about is like it was like they were using psychological warfare on these people. Whatever the beings were, they're using a form of psychological warfare. I mean, because like you said, by the end of the 2 years, they're all in the same room sleeping and terrified.
Yeah. No, it just like what you said with the cows. Why these people?
Right.
What did this poor family do to piss these aliens off other than just to own the ranch?
Right. Well, and you got to think that the previous owners knew about this stuff, because one of the things that, we talked about, we kind of alluded to it earlier with the whole don't dig without previous, blah, blah, blah. But it seemed like digging would spur the activity. It would be a precursor. You start digging and it pisses them off. So now they start, doing
it. He dug with a post hole digger. Post hole diggers end up in a tree.
Right. And it kind of makes you wonder, what is underneath SkinWalker Ranch that they do not want you to see?
Right. And it has to go bigger than just, the legend of the Skinwalker being in that valley.
Right.
Because, I mean, that's what we were talking about at the very beginning of this thing. There are so many layers to this story that we're only going to scratch the surface. We've talked a little bit about the Native American Skinwalker themselves being a trickster, being cunning. We talked about the humanoid dog people. Now we talked about aliens, but there's so much good here.
Right. Well, and so Bigelow comes in, basically saves the family, buys the ranch.
He bought 500 acres for $200,000 in 1996.
Yeah.
Which is nothing.
Right.
I mean, there are places in our country that you can still buy 500 acres for $200, but there's nothing there.
Right.
I've seen, for comparison, there's like 100 acres I saw in like Iowa for like 40 grand, but it's like 300 miles from anywhere, and it's a little plot, and you don't even get the water rights, the mineral rights, you don't get anything. This guy bought 500 acres in northern Utah with 3 houses on it. It's already got a whole bunch of lore.
Yep.
It's isolated. It's got, I mean, for 200 grand, I mean, that's, for somebody like Robert Bigelow, it's a drop in the hat.
Right. And the amazing thing to me was they buy it, and Bigelow bought them a new house.
Oh, I didn't see that part.
Yep. Bigelow actually bought them a new house and moved them there, but he asked Mr. Sherman, Mr. Gorman, whatever you want to call him, to stay on. And this man, I mean, has like an inner strength that's just amazing, because he did not want that whatever it is to win and scare him off his land. So he stayed on as the caretaker after Bigelow bought the farm. So, I mean, kudos to that guy. I mean, he's got balls. Like I said earlier, I would walk down seeing the wolf, said, "Oh, beautiful place. Too bad we can't stay."
So he buys this thing, and now there's a little bit of notoriety that kind of went with Bigelow buying this ranch. There's a famed skeptic named James Randi who created created something called the Pegasus Award. Now, the Pegasus Award was something that was tongue in cheek about giving this for paranormal investigators, for parapsychology, for well, he created this award, and he ended up giving it to Bigelow for the purchase of this ranch, because it was like if they were to take the Amityville thing and blow it up and make it a national center for creating or a national center of like looking into ghosts in demonology and stuff like that. So James Randi, he's a skeptic. He created this award and gave it to them for buying the ranch, because he just thought this whole thing was just bullshit. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. It was kind of funny, but he was also he funded the purchase of the ranch. Bigelow did, but it was also done with Harvard professor John Mack and an author, Bud Hopkins. So with that part, I'm going to go into a little bit more about Robert Bigelow's whole timeline of his science. Bigelow created the National Institute of Discovery of Science, NIDS, which we kind of talked about, but that was shut down in 2004. So they put their national they used the ranch as the place where that was their national headquarters.
Yeah, for the research and for pretty much anything having to do with the paranormal or UFOs or UFOlogy, and
But then that was later changed to replaced by Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS.
Right.
BASS. But and that's why we keep calling it Bigelow Aerospace, is because NIDS evolved into that, and then that ended up evolving. But that's further down the timeline.
Right. Well, and okay, so we've talked about all the stuff that happened while the Shermans, the Gormans, whoever you want to call them, lived there. Yes. Now, George Knapp came in while the Shermans and Gormans still lived there.
Yes.
And the funny thing is it's like whoever it was knew who he was, knew he was a prize-winning journalist. He never saw anything happen on the ranch. I mean, he believed it, but he never saw anything. I mean, they set him in the same spot where the meditating guy was, and nothing.
Right. Yeah. So he ended up writing a book called Hunt for the Skinwalker.
Right.
Which is about his time there, and it goes into detail about what the Skinwalker was, what everybody talked about seeing on there, and then his results from being there.
Right. And you can hear all of his stories by going to YouTube and just searching George Knapp SkinWalker Ranch. And I mean, he does all these talks all over the country. He goes to universities, go to other places, and he'll be up there talking about this stuff. And he goes over pretty much everything we've talked about already. But he also goes into other things that, like you said, we are only scratching the surface. We can't really touch on everything. But after Bigelow bought the ranch and they started doing research, they started seeing some really, really weird shit. And they would just go off. Like, one of the things that they saw is there was two researchers out in the field one night, and they saw this bright yellow orb in the sky. So one of them puts on night vision goggles and the other one doesn't. He just watches it. The guy with night vision goggles looks at this orb in the sky and now sees it as a tunnel in the sky. And so he's watching this tunnel, and he sees this figure like grabbing and pulling itself out of the tunnel. And then it pulls itself out, stands up, and it's 9 feet tall, he's estimating, and it runs off into the woods. And he looks at the guy next to him and said, "Did you see any of that?" And the guy's like, because after that, the orb disappeared.
Did you see the size of that chicken?
Right. And the guy's like, "No, all I saw was an orb, and then it just disappeared." And then he described what he saw, and the guy's like, "Nah, I didn't see any of that." But, I mean, it's shit like that. I mean, there's so many theories. There's theories like it could be, a gateway there to an extra different dimension, a wormhole for space, and I'm still wondering what the hell is underneath the fucking ranch.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought the orbs, though, because one of the most consistent stories that you hear about this area of Utah is the orbs. If you watch the YouTube video where I forgot the guy's name. It takes Joe Rogan out to the ranch. Or, okay, you can't get on the ranch, but you can get near it.
Right.
You can get to a hillside where you can look down into it. That's about as close as you can get. And this guy claims to seen orbs multiple times. Of course, every time you take a camera out there, you don't see it.
Right.
But that's like the most consistent story is orbs. Now, this isn't the only place you see orbs like that. There's whether it's real or not, there's footage of orbs in the UK over top of a field, and they zip around the field, and lo and behold, there's crop circles.
Right.
So orbs have been seen all over the country in various different reasons, but they're consistent with other
activity.
Yes.
Yeah. And, the shit that would go on there, I just found so amazing, but again, terrifying. I have no desire to go there. I'm interested in learning about all the shit that happens, but I don't want to go there.
Well, like Area 51, there is now a perimeter set up all the way around the ranch, and there's actually armed guards and the one road that goes back there. So where we talked about before, don't go to the ranch. Don't go to the ranch.
Yeah, you know what? I highly recommend watch the documentary, The Hunt for the Skinwalker. That documentary is all of George Knapp's stuff. Plus, it's I think this came out in like 2014 or 2015, and they actually show, the new owner, who, as we say, is probably Bigelow, but They show him sitting in a chair, but don't show his head, and his voice is altered, as they're interviewing him. Because he wants to stay secret, blah blah blah. So it's Bigelow. But the people that are on the land are all carrying automatic rifles.
Yes.
Nobody walks around without a weapon.
Right.
So there's people have gone to try to see it because they're fascinated by it, and they are met at the gate, because the gate is the only way onto the property.
Yes.
There's one road that goes into it, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're met at the gate and basically threatened and intimidated until they leave.
Yes.
So if you go and try to show up, don't, because they're not going to let you on. And if you keep persisting, they might just shoot your ass.
Right. Just like the famed signs outside of Area 51 where the use of deadly force is authorized.
Yeah.
I don't know if those signs exist around SkinWalker Ranch because it's not technically a military establishment, but there are armed guards. Just don't go.
Right.
Watch the documentary. So
right.
I kind of wanted to run down the timeline because we keep saying it's Bigelow still owns it. So I kind of want to run down the timeline really quick. So NIDS or Bigelow, whichever you want to refer to it as, Robert Bigelow buys SkinWalker Ranch for a mere $200,000 in 1996. Then in 2004, NIDS is shut down, and it is replaced or evolves into Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. So they were a more clandestine mission statement than NIDS, and government sponsorship was on the horizon. Then the government started the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which was a secret investigatory effort funded by the U.S. government to study the UFOs and the activity on SkinWalker Ranch. That was in 2007. 2012, Bigelow Aerospace lost their funding from the Department of Defense, and the AATIP, the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, contract expired, and it wasn't renewed because of Luis Elzonado. No, I just killed his name, but he did a thing about potential misappropriation of taxpayer funds, so they shut that identification program down, and then in 2013, several months after the closure of the government-sponsored identification program, an unusually expensive, unique-looking war monument was suddenly paid for by the government to build on Fort Duquesne. And Fort Duquesne is the Air Force base, or the military base, that's just outside of SkinWalker Ranch. I referred to that. They did the testing.
Right.
And, so SkinWalker Ranch then was sold for $4.5 million to an undisclosed buyer who operates under the corporation Adamantium Holdings.
Right.
And so Adamantium Holdings is this shell corporation that nobody knows who it is, but everybody believes that it's still Bigelow. So Bigelow paid himself $4.5 million for something 20 years ago he bought for $200,000.
Right.
But because nobody knows who it is, that's where the cloud of secrecy now is. Is this the new Area 51?
Right. The person who made the documentary's name is Jeremy Corbell, and he has a series of documentaries. Where did it go? Extraordinary Beliefs is his documentary series.
And you can find more of his stuff at hunttheskinwalker.com. Okay,
there you go.
The website.
But he's the one that released the documentary with all of George Knapp's things, and Colm Keller was the lead scientist that was in charge of the research. And it wasn't just SkinWalker Ranch where this stuff happened, and you find that out in the documentary too. They interviewed neighbors adjacent to SkinWalker Ranch. Now, one neighbor, his horses were dead. He found his horses dead. One of them, they were in a corral when he went to bed. He comes out, and there's no signs of any injuries, but one of them is in a pond. And he just finds the bodies all over the place. Now, no animal that I can think of can kill a horse without leaving marks and pick it up and carry it to a fucking pond.
Right.
And leave it there. An animal that did that would probably just kill one horse and eat it. Because that's their goal for killing is survival.
And if it was a wolf, they're pack animals, so they would have dropped it where it was at and ate it where it was at.
Right.
They wouldn't have carried it away anywhere.
Right. So that just things just don't add up, and they also things happen on the reservation as well, because they also interviewed some Utes from the reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like we said, this is a hotbed. It's not just SkinWalker Ranch, but this whole area of Utah is a hotbed for supposed UFO activity.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. I don't live there. I've never been there. I've never seen anything. I'm just going off what other people have said. And I'm also somewhat of a skeptic because of the fact that there's so many military bases up there.
Yeah.
But so they interviewed these two natives, and they interviewed like some of the police force and stuff in this documentary. And another reason why I say don't go out there is because people that have seen things, have seen lights and stuff like that, get sick. Like this, it is just. I mean, it seems like a coincidence, but I don't always believe in coincidences, because like this mother was with her son. Her son's like 30 years old, and he was healthy until they saw the lights. They went outside to see what it was, and now he has MS. A lot of spikes in cancer around these activities and stuff like that.
Well,
so it's a safety thing for your health.
Right. So to go along that, there was a movie made in the late 60s. It starred John Wayne. It was a Genghis Khan movie. He was playing Genghis Khan. It was shot in the desert in Nevada. Okay. A large chunk of the people that worked on this movie ended up coming down with cancer or dying of cancer, including one John Wayne.
Right.
Because they were downwind of the area where they did all the nuclear bomb testing. All that fallout ended up in the desert where they shot this movie, with their horses and their vehicles and everything kicking up that dust.
Oh, yeah.
Radioactive. All those people ended up coming down with cancer, including an American icon named John Wayne.
You imagine if he saw the aliens, would he be like, "Well, hey there, Pilgrim."
well, hey there, Mr. Gray.
I think you need to shimmy on out of these parts.
So that's another reason not to go into these areas, because we're Americans. We're parasites. We fuck shit up. We're viruses, just like in the Matrix that I talked about. We are the virus. We fuck everything up that we touch.
Yeah, and there's one thing that the white man can do. It's destroy everything they touch.
Exactly. And then figure out how to be paid to do it.
Right. And then to commercialize it.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother wormhole.
Exactly. So one of the things that keeps the mystique of SkinWalker Ranch going is the money that has been funded into this place.
Yeah.
Now, this Luis Elizondo, I think is his name now, is an ex-intelligence officer, did this investigation. I kind of alluded to it before, but him and Senator Harry Reid confirmed his role into getting $22 million a year to fund all of the phenomenon that happened at SkinWalker Ranch. Plus, I do an exotic identification of craft and a study into exotic alloys and artifacts. But most of that $22 million a year was going right into Bigelow's pocket.
Right.
So, and that just came out just in 2017. So this is, I mean, we're only 20 years away from the family living there. And now we're, for the last 10 years, we're talking $200 million has been funded to Bigelow to study the phenomenon that happened where this family was. Now, I kind of said something before. This would be on the same scale as if the house in Amityville on Long Island was turned into like a demonology investigation thing, or
Headquarters.
a research facility.
Yeah.
And they start pumping in millions and millions and millions of dollars into this place, and then put a huge wall around it with armed guards.
Right.
Because you can't say for certain that there's real activity that's happened there, because we don't know who the family is. We don't really have we've had people investigate the place, but they didn't come up with the same findings. We have people that have taken people out there to see the orbs, but have not seen them.
Right.
You know, they're skeptics. And
well, there was a quote that came out of all this that I really liked, and it was when Corbell was doing his documentary, he was sitting around a campfire with a bunch of the people that are basically guarding the property and stuff like this. And he asked one, do you believe? And the guy said he no longer has the luxury of disbelief. But, it's like you said, all these people that are going out there to try to film something like nobody sees anything. But again, we touched on that earlier, that these are sentient beings that know you're trying to capture them on film.
Right. And they could still be there. They may have the technology not to allow us to be able to see them. They're only seen when they want to be.
Right. And it's like I touched on with the guy with the night vision goggles watching it come out of a fucking wormhole, and the other guy saw nothing.
Yeah.
If they have the technology to create a wormhole, they have technology superior to anything that we have.
So there's an equation out there called the Drake equation. Okay. And this is how to calculate the amount of life that's in the universe. And I don't know all of the things, but essentially it's like, how many stars are there in the universe? How many of those stars have planets? How many of those planets are in the Goldilocks zone? How many of those are in the same time period from formation that we are? How many of them, this puts it all down, and he comes up with, if you know the answer to the first one, how many stars there are, you can calculate how many planets are out there that have life that is the same age as us. Right. But the one thing that is different or the one thing that I find is interesting is we talk about like life on Mars, that there microscopic microbes that were alive on another planet, or in Europa, is there life underneath the frozen ice? Those are creatures that we wouldn't expect to be able to fly here.
Right.
But we're talking about human existence only being technologically advanced enough in the last just couple hundred years to be able to do flight, create technology, phones, communications, being able to go into space. We're really only like 50, 60 years at that point. These civilizations could be millions of years ahead of us.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take the Star Trek world, that's only 300 years from now.
Right.
So now imagine they have 1 million years on them. Right. And where they could be. So there's technology out there, just like in the olden days. If we were to bring back a cell phone and say that in medieval times, they're going to think it's sorcery.
Right.
Because
I'm going to put this out there. To any of you people that are listening who think it's all bullshit, UFOs are bullshit, we're the only people that exist in the universe, or the only beings that exist in the universe, I'm going to tell you, the universe is vast. The universe is so big you can't even comprehend how big the fucking universe is.
Right.
And to think that our planet, which in the grand scheme of things is this insignificant little ball of gas and dust and water, is the most important thing in this universe, is just ignorant.
Right.
And to think that we're the only living beings in the whole universe is also ignorant.
There's places on our Earth. There's parts of the Amazon we've never been to. We've only explored 10% of the bottom of the ocean. We're finding new species on our own planet every single day. To say that parts of the universe that we've not seen, not been to, couldn't have extraterrestrial life, you're right, is ignorant.
Well, and, I've also been doing more research on some other things that I just found fascinating. And, I mean, they have found pyramids in Antarctica.
Yes.
That are hollow. I mean, the Sphinx has a hollowed out area underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a theory that we had advanced technology, and basically we created an ice age like we're trying to do now that wiped everything out, and we had to start back over.
Yeah.
The world is cyclical, however you say that. Everything keeps going, and we've said before in other podcasts, that famous quote, "Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it."
Exactly. In going back to what you're saying, that there's pyramids in there, in the Sphinx. That's the part I wanted to touch on. They know today that the Sphinx was there up to 1,000 years before the pyramids were.
Yeah. I actually watched a video on it last night, and they really pissed off a bunch of Egyptologists because they said that the Sphinx actually, because of the weather erosion on it,
Mm-hmm.
it was created in the time when it wasn't the Sahara Desert, when it was more of a tropical and rain.
Right, because there's water erosion, like it was submerged at one point in time.
Right. So they say that it wasn't built in 2500 BC like it was claimed to. They're saying that it was built in 10,500 BC, and it had a lion's head that was then resculptured into the pharaoh head.
Hmm.
I think that might be the video I sent you last night, which
Okay.
you find fascinating. I'm sorry, this is going to be an entire different podcast on its own, but we're just touching on it a little bit here.
Because we're touching on all that because that there's so much just to this one little story, but
Yeah.
This story is like interconnected with so much more on our planet.
Right. And it's just, and I'm going to touch on it again. It's for everybody who's disbelieving all this stuff, who thinks that, this shit can't happen. And, not all of them, but probably a good 50% of them believe in this fictional book and this, fictional being in the sky, but can't believe in this.
Right.
And the other ones are like going, well, it's not scientifically proven, but that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up the Sphinx and stuff like that, because that is scientifically proven.
Yes.
So it comes down to ignorance and not wanting to see facts.
Yeah. And the whole idea of spend your years doing good, being good, so that you can be rewarded at the end with gifts, there is ridiculous. And I'm not talking about being nice and believing in Santa Claus or in Jesus Christ. In both cases, it's the same fucking story. You have to be good to get rewarded. If you don't believe in the Santa, why do you believe in the other one?
Right. Well, and also, I mean, oh shit, lost train of thought. We were talking about belief, blah blah blah. Yeah, I lost it. It's gone. Please come back.
All right. So let's summarize.
All right. Summarize. Okay, so in 1994, the Sherman Gorman family bought their ideal dream place, the SkinWalker Ranch. And then all hell broke loose.
and then Bigelow bought it, and he still owns it, and he made millions off it. So
right. But I mean, I still, I look at all this, and I'm like, it's fascinating, and there's still a big part of me that's skeptical of it because, again, we don't know what our government is doing with these military bases.
Right.
We don't know the true technology that exists that we have created.
Right.
And we won't know until they reveal it. But I mean, it was like a couple years ago that it was like the Department of Defense released videos of actual alien spacecraft,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they had to because people were starting to release other shit.
Yeah. And we released footage that we have unmanned drones that can reach speeds of 13,000 miles per hour, meaning they can be anywhere in our planet in less than 2 hours.
Wow.
And the only reason that they told anybody about this is because one crashed.
Yeah.
And they had to like stop the hysteria of people believing that it was a UFO, say, no, that's ours.
Right. Well, and you know, there it's I mean, that's all another theory. Another theory about SkinWalker Ranch is it's a place lost in time.
Yes.
So, which would make a lot of sense. I'm sorry, folks. I'm watching Jason make weird faces at his wife. I'm thinking.
Exactly.
But yeah, so there is so much to this that, you know, we've just, like we said, scratched the surface, but there is, you know, I implore you to go out and do your own research on this. If this is something that interests you, go out and check out the websites, watch the videos, but for God's sakes, don't fucking go there.
Right.
I mean, we already talked about ignorance. That's fucking ignorant.
Exactly. They're not going to let you in Area 51. They're not going to let you on SkinWalker Ranch.
Right. They will probably kill your ass.
Or worse, experiment on you.
Right. Anal probes.
All
That's
right.
our new gift. Anal probes.
Anal probes. Anal probes. SkinWalker Ranch. Anal
Yep.
probes. So, all right. With that, we thank you for listening today. We're going to sum this up.
Yep.
Don't go there.
Right. And,
So-
you know, if you guys found this one entertaining and some of our other podcasts entertaining, and there's something that you would like to hear us talk about, you know, leave us a note underneath the video, you know, in the comment section, and we'll, if it's something that we think, hey, that'd be pretty fucking cool, we'll check it out, because we're kind of geeks and we love learning shit.
Exactly. That's kind of why we started this.
Yep.
So hit us up on Twitter, Instagram at The Bunny's Hole. At both of those, hit us up on Facebook, The Bunny Rabbit's Hole. Hit us up on our website, thebunnyrabbitshole.com. Yeah.
And our YouTube channel, what's our YouTube channel called again?
The Bunny Rabbit's Hole.
All one word, though.
Yes.
So, all right, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. We love you all. And until next time.
Insert tagline here.
There you go. All right. Peace out, everyone.